welcome this evening to the next in our series, STEM Industry in the North sessions. This evening we are looking at forestry. My name is Janie Irving and I am joined today by one of my colleagues, Mark Irwin, and we will be facilitating the session in the chat and also facilitating the Q&A at the end of the session as well. Really excited for today's session. Forestry and the land-based sector is an area that I've always been particularly interested in, and I think possibly living in the middle of rural Moray, it's certainly something that I see every day on my doorstep, and it's something that my pupils were always very interested in as well. So here to tell us more about forestry in Scotland, I am delighted to welcome Ros Wardman who's a Forest Industries Advisor from Scottish Forestry. We also have Julian Hollingdale from Forest Certification and Development Manager at Till Hill, and Neil Cleland, who's the Deputy Head of the Scottish School of Forestry, who will also be talking to about some of the opportunities through UHI. Just a quick run through the webinar protocols. As you can see, they're on there. I'm suggesting that as the main part of the presentation will be recorded today, it's a good idea to turn off your microphone, turn off your camera, just post comments, questions and thoughts into the chat window, and then we'll have a Q&A after the main presentation, which won't be recorded. And as I said, the chat's facilitated by a member of our team, and there's a couple of things there for accessibility as well. So you can turn on live captions if that's helpful, and you can also change the language of those live captions. So at the top of your screen in Teams, there's a little bit that says more, and if you go on to that, you can see live captions there if that's useful to you. So I am going to hand over to Ros Wardman, who will talk to us a little bit about the overview of the sector in terms of forestry. Hand over to you, Ros.
Thank you, Janie. Yes, so I'm Ros Wardman. I am a Forest Industries Advisor at Scottish Forestry. We're not going to look at our first slide just for the time being. I'm just going to start with a little overview of forestry and what I do. I've been working in forestry for approximately 15 years now, and that's been in operational forestry. So I've been a work supervisor, a recreation manager, a woodland officer, and then in the past year or so I moved on to more the policy side, and that is with Scottish Forestry. Scottish Forestry is the government agency responsible for forest policy support and regulations. And you'll be forgiven if you've never heard of Scottish Forestry, because we used to be known as Forestry Commission Scotland. That name was in place for about 100 years, and then in April 2019 we changed to Scottish Forestry, as I said, policy and regulation side, and then Forestry and Land Scotland. And you'll probably be more aware of who they are because they're the ones who are managing the National Forest Estate, and you've probably been for a walk or a mountain bike or visited one of those woodlands. So Scottish Forestry, we work on behalf of the whole forest industry and landowners, and providing that guidance and good practice for sustainable forest management. And so that is to ensure that we can continue using our forests in such a way and at such a rate that maintains biodiversity and productivity now and for the future. And so it's not doing, causing harm to any ecosystems and whatnot. The best practice could be summed up just in the UK Forestry Standard. That is the Bible that we work to, that is the document, full compliance, and then you can also apply for grants and felling permissions if you can demonstrate that is what you're working to good sustainable forestry. Forestry in Scotland is it covers about 19% of the land cover. And the Scottish Government have laid out ambitious plans to increase that forest cover to approximately 23% by 2032. So new planting at the moment is sitting at about 12,000 hectares a year, I don't know if you know what a hectare is. It's 100 by 100 meters square. And so that's for 1 hectare. So we're sitting at 12,000 at the moment, moving up to 18,000 hectares of new planting from 2024. And the aim of that is to mitigate against climate change, provide sustainable jobs and support the Scottish economy. Forestry in Scotland is worth approximately £1 billion and employs about 25,000 people. And that's across a range of businesses. So you've got the public sector, like I'm in, then you've got the private forestry companies, and then also there's small scale family businesses and self-employed contractors as well. I think first and foremost, we've got to remember that wood is all around us. I'm sitting at a desk that's made out of wood. I've got my window frames next to me. I've got a pencil. I've had an apple today that was grown on a tree. You know, we are constantly surrounded by wood products, timber, and it's an industry that affects all our lives and touches us in all these different ways, whether it be a walk in the woods, you know, for your mental health and well-being, or if, like me, you work in it. It's a great time to be joining the forest industry because of this increased planting targets. Those forests have to be planted and then they have to be managed as well. And some of my work involves talking to young people about what they want from their forests and forests for the future. And young people are really interested in climate and the environment and sustainability to ensure that it is still there for then when they are the people looking after the land, and they want to be involved. So I would say if you have any students who are interested in the outdoors, in climate, then forestry is a really good option for them. I'm going to have a very quick look at the breadth of jobs within the industry, or the types of things that we can be involved in. Now we will have a look at these. I've got 3 slides to show you. So I've separated it down into social, economic and environmental. So I don't know if that's going to be moved on or if I take control. Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. So social jobs in this area can be focused on things like community engagement. That's enabling local communities to get involved with the planning of their woodlands. We've got recreation, so mountain biking, walking, horse riding. We've got a photo of a motor rally there. These are all the things that can be taking part in a woodland, and you are going to need good event planning, good risk assessment, and a really good knowledge of the Scottish Outdoor Access Code. We've also got Forest School. We've got a photo in there of some kids out in the woods having hot chocolate and whatnot. And we've got woodlands can facilitate learning in a very different way to the classroom. So there's these options, and we've got the health and well-being that I've spoken about before. Woodlands can be used for dementia groups, for cardio fitness, or for full relaxation in forest bathing. So there's a whole, the social side is a really interesting, person-centered, I would say, bringing people into the woodlands so that they can participate and feel a sense of ownership. We'll move on now to the economic areas of forestry, and we've got in here, we've got a guy there planting trees. I would say he's got a really easy site to plant trees on personally, but even before we get to that site, the trees that are in that bag need to be grown. So this industry starts from the collecting of the tree seeds, and it is the growing on of those seeds in the nurseries, distributing them across Scotland, and the planting to meet those planting targets. And all of those are involving jobs. Some of them, that the planting job, that is a very hard job. We've also got the planning of the forests as well. We've got digital mapping and looking to the future. So a forester in that sense isn't just looking at the here and now, it's looking at what the environment and the climate will sustain in 25, 50, 75, 100 years time. So you've got to have kind of, being able to see the bigger picture. We've also, one of the pictures there is the inside of a harvester cab. So this is, you can be using a chainsaw to take down individual trees, but there's also the harvesting. So huge mechanization of timber felling, moving it through the system into the sawmills, and all the haulage and engineering involved with all of that. So then the processing of the timber goes on to create, materials for construction, for fencing. Maybe you put a shed up this last summer, and also, furniture, nice high-end bookshelves, things like that. And of course, firewood. We'll go on to the environment slide now, which is really, everything to do with the land. And I would focus that it's such a broad area, but I'm just trying to give you this little insight into, we've got climate change and forestry's response to that through planting, but we can also have wind farms on forest sites as well. We've got the response to climate change with pests and diseases. We've got a lot more getting a good foothold over the winter, where we're not getting as cold winters. Warmer, milder weather enables pests and diseases to really, move through the forests and, cause problems there. And we've got to learn about those, and we've got to model what is happening with them. So there's a very scientific part to forestry to do with climate modelling, pests and diseases, soil science. The list is endless, really. And also, the protection and management of important and sensitive species, red squirrel, osprey, we've got there. And also things like deer control. We need our woodlands to be able to grow and become established. So those 3 slides were just a real quick snapshot of just the environments that, if you were going to work in forestry, where you may find yourself. Sometimes it is outside, sometimes it's inside. And there's a variety of pathways to get into forestry. There's the traditional educational route, so which I think we've got another speaker who will talk about that. So things like the higher education, Nat 5 certificates, advanced certificates in things like rural skills, forestry and arboriculture, and places like SRUC will deliver those sort of courses. I did a foundation degree, or HND, in forestry when I was studying, and you can also do degrees in various places. I would also say consider geography, geology, environmental science, conservation, because these are also other courses that can help you move into environmental, forestry, land management types of work. There are also apprenticeships. It's a trees and timber apprenticeship that are advertised in places like Forestry and Land Scotland. They come up every few years. There'll be a raft of those. And then there's also graduate schemes. So if you've already studied forestry or environmental science or geography and biology, then some of the private companies run graduate development programs. So you'll be there for 2 years and you'll work your way through the business and get a really good insight into forestry. I would always say, if you have somebody who is interested in working in forestry, then gaining skills to do with the outdoor or the environment, so whether that be tree planting, hedgerow planting, will be incredibly valuable, or even just taking part in environmental projects. I'm very aware that not everybody does want to work outside, and that does not stop you from working in forestry. It's about having, good team working skills, and also, being able to be outdoors at times, map reading, and having a driving license are all things that I think will help you develop into a career in forestry. I think I'll leave it there, because otherwise, I could go on. I could have put so many photos into these slides for you. We could have had a whole family family slideshow of everything going on in forestry. But I'll leave it there as an introduction, and certainly I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Ros. I think that's given us a fantastic flying start for today's session, and so much to think about. I'm sitting taking an awful lot of notes here, so I know that I at least will have a number of questions, and I hope others in the attendees will have questions for you in our Q&A at the end. So thank you very much. I'm going to just say we will move on. I'm just going to put this slide up, and we're just going to move on and hear from Julian next. Welcome, Julian.
Thanks, Jenny. Good evening all. A little bit about myself. So my name's Julian Hollingdale. I'm the certification manager for Till Hill. And Ros has sort of covered many of the jobs that are available in forestry. But if you hadn't have heard that, what do you think of when you hear about jobs in forestry? I think a perception is that there's lots of people cutting down trees, working for the Forestry Commission. So yeah, I don't work for the Forestry Commission. I work for the private sector. So Till Hill, we're owned by a company called Binderholt, probably not heard of them, but they own a number of companies in the sector. So BSW, which is our parent company, so we have a nursery, and that's a nursery for trees, not for children. So they provide us with many of the trees for our forests. And then we have the mill, the BSW mill. We've got a harvesting company called Dick Brothers, and Till Hill. I graduated from University of Wales Bangor, and I've been in forestry for just over 20 years. And I've been an operational forester, and I'm now the certification manager. And I'll just go into I'll cover what that is here. So the certification manager, so my job is to ensure that the forests that we manage are to a required standard. We love acronyms in forestry, unfortunately. So I'm the UCWAS manager, which is the UK Woodland Assurance Standard, and it's my job to make sure that the forests are sustainable, and everything, the work is carried out in the correct way. And as was said there, forestry is massively important for the toolkit to address the challenges of climate change. It's a really exciting time to be in forestry. The forestry sector is expanding. We have huge demand for forest managers. It's not just forest management where there's demand. It's across the sector. In fact, there is a general skills shortage, it's fair to say. We're looking for people who can plant trees, who can fence, who can operate machinery, haulage. There's significant demand for jobs. You can just put the next slide there, please. You go to the next slide. Yeah. So the jobs that we get involved with. One day we are out and about in the forest, and also in an office. As you sort of progress through the career, you end up perhaps driving a desk more than driving a harvester, and that's the position I find myself, where I'm probably in the office 4 days a week, whereas the graduates are out and about. Probably around about four days a week, and in the office 1 day a week. So many of our clients have multiple objectives, whether it's sort of commercial growing conifers, looking after the environment, and the sort of social, recreational side. So the forest managers, they have to listen to the various demands placed upon them from the client objectives to the legal requirement to looking after the environment. And they need to balance those to come up with the decisions to manage the property. So communicator leadership, these are the skills that are required, as well as the subjects of biology and maths and the topics that are covered at the schools. So it's a really range of requirements for forestry. So yeah, lots of statistics being done by the forest managers, and those skills you pick up in school are being used by the operational managers out and about. And then the final slide. So yeah, just to say that there is a huge demand for jobs across the sector, and also the way sort of change in the use of technology is increasing, and to try and keep pace with that, we need good graduates to come out with the skills that are able to manage the forest. We're really fortunate that we have the Scottish School of Forestry on our doorstep here in Inverness. And the next presenter will go into a lot more detail. But to find your way into the graduate programme for Till Hill, you need either HND or BSc or the certificate in forestry. If you want to be the forest manager, there's these other careers we've been talking about. There's different levels of competency that we require, but for forest management you need an HND or degree, but they're in the different certificates for operating machinery, for chainsawing, and Neil will explain more about those certificates. And a nice picture there to finish with. Over to you, Neil.
Thanks very much, Julian. Yep, I'll just leave it with that nice picture there, something that I see quite on a regular basis, I'd say, as I'm heading off down the road. And I'm going to hand over to our final speaker today, that is Neil. So I'm actually going to stop presenting so we can hear from Neil.
Thank you very much. Nicely led in there, Julian. Thank you. Yes, Scottish School of Forestry, the history with us. We've been here for, we're set up in 1974. So we've been on this particular site that was gifted to us by the Forestry Commission way back then as a forestry industry training centre. So that's where we started off, and over the years we've increased, going from an OND and then handing into the HND, which started in the early 90s, and then the degree kicking in around about the same time. So we've really come on from the early days of just training the chainsaw and the machine operators of the day to going full on to training our future foresters. I know many of my colleagues that came through the college when I was here back in '86 are still out there in industry right across the world. So what we provide at the Scottish School of Forestry isn't just about a local provision, it's about a national and an international provision. And Julian and Ross both alluded to the need to get people into the forestry sector, and it's huge. I think there was a research program done a few years ago by Ewan Bowditch looking at the kind of the forestry sector sort of cohort, and the fact that we're getting an aging population within the forestry sector, and what are we going to do to plug that gap? And that's something that I think Till Hill certainly has grabbed the bull by the horns. We're certainly doing the same, and Scottish Forestry with the MA program kicking in. So I think industry is looking to improve what it can do to get folk out there. Here at the Scottish School of Forestry, our program, we start off at the schools, where we have a level 4 program, Skills for Work, which links in with the schools in the Highlands, and that is a Friday daytime. The school kids come to us and we offer them 7 credits, so over the course of the year, that they can go away with, and the idea is to allow them kind of a basic entry into the rural environment, what's available to them, whether it be forestry, farming, gamekeeping, equestrian, etc. So we're kind of training the kids how to get dirty, learn new skills, how to operate it's like basic sort of power tools, etc. Not chainsaws, but like drills and things like that, to get them into the habit of manual labour. And that then can feed into a full-time level 4 course, which is a NC Rural Skills course. And that idea is to widen that practical experience again and increasing that skills base. So we start introducing them to sort of small sawmills, clearing saws, sort of small kind of machinery tools, but also then getting their heads into planning operations. At the process, I'm building a dry stone wall with a group of students just now to surround one of our sort of arboricultural pieces that we've just had installed in place to do with hard landscaping. So we do incorporate sort of practical stuff, which isn't just built and then knocked down again. We do actually make things, hopefully make things last. So that's our level 4 program, which is a year. And that goes into a level 5 program, the Certificate in Forestry, which we've had running here for probably nigh on 30 years. And that kind of targeted the need by industry for the practical based forestry, the chainsaws, the tractor driving, the tree planting, everything that both Ross and Julian were alluding to. And we're still doing it. It's probably one of our strongest programs. The issue we've always had is getting that certification sorted out and getting the right the right person into the job. I think Julian, brilliant. He alluded to the need for having the basic skills in education, whether it be maths, English, science of some sort, Ross, geography, biology, anything linked with the environment, environmental science. And I think trying to get to schools and get that message across to them that, that there's a lot more to what we have to offer as an industry, not just an education facility here, but as an industry. We need our students, our pupils, our future foresters to come to us at this level and be prepared to use their brains and a little bit of nous as well. Yes, we still need those guys quite happy to plant for the rest of the days, and I've got no issue with that because I think it's a very fulfilling job. I used to do it when I was younger as well. But there's also that desire to, where can you move? What can you move forward? So we're always looking at how to improve our provision at level 5. Recently, we set up a level 6 program because we were finding the jump from our level 5 to the HND, the first year HND, for a lot of students was just a little bit too much. They would start the HN and they would basically fall away because the academic side they found very, very difficult to keep on top of. So we introduced a level 6 program to allow them a kind of a stepping stone. You still had the jump if they wanted it, but the level 6 allowed these guys who just struggled a little bit just to get a little bit more, another year's worth of practice and understanding of what the academic requirements are for when they go into HN. And then at the and then at the same time, and thank you, Ross, for mentioning about the MA program, the trees and timber and the general woodland. We've been doing that for the last couple of years, primarily in conjunction with Forestry Land Scotland. We've had, between the 2 years, we've got, I think it's 9 this year. Was it more than that? 14 this year, sorry, and it was 8 the first year. But we've also tapped in with the private sector, slightly smaller numbers, but we are looking at a way to increase that. So I've been talking to a variety of private landowners in the area to see what they need and how we can improve that provision for them. And also in the arboricultural side of things, we've had approaches from the Highland Council and various other organisations looking at how we can provide an MA programme for the arboricultural field in forestry or in the forestry sector. Then we have the HNC, HND program in forestry. So that's normally a 3-year program. You do the first year on the campus here, face-to-face. Most of it's face-to-face. Recently with COVID, we've had to introduce some online delivery, but we are going back to, I would say, 80 to 90% face-to-face with some online kept simply because it works better for the larger classes, which allows my timetabling and my allocation of staff to be a bit more sort of efficient. But then after the first year, they then go on to a practical placement year. Now that could be anywhere. I have got potentially 2 placements in Australia coming up. I've got a guy in Canada just now who's on placement. He's working for 2 or 3 organisations over there, doing very, very sort of steep slope, serious harvesting over in the north of Canada. But we also have a lot of locals. Till Hill take on placements for us. We've had Scottish Woodlands, Forestry Land Scotland, Scottish Forestry occasionally, and we go south of the border. So we've also got Forestry Commission England, National Resource Wales, Northern Irish Forest Service, plus quite a lot of housing estates. Sorry, quite a lot of estates. I was thinking like the Hatfield House Chatsworth and Attingham, for example, and also Windsor, they've taken on, and the Crown Estates. So, the provision for these guys is to get out into placement and get that year's worth of experience. So what they've learned in the first year, they take out into industry, practice, put it into practice, learn a little bit more, make the odd mistake, hopefully not too big, learn not to do it again. And then the idea would be once they finish that placement, they generally would come back to us to finish the full-time course. Sorry, got a flying midge or something. Full-time course into the second year, where they would then start learning a bit more of the managerial side of it, so the managerial skills linked with forestry. And then once they've completed that year, they then go on to, and they've got the option then to go on to the BSc in forest management, which then can go on to an honours, and they have the potential onto an MSc if they so wish. But at the HNCD level, we've also got the arboriculture and urban forestry pathway. So the students at the level 4, level 5 and level 6, they do get introduced to the arboriculture aspect of the industry, and then they can either direct entry into the arboriculture, or they come through our 5 and 6 stream onto the arboricultural sort of pathway if they so choose. Now, at the moment, there's no mid-year placement requirement for it, but there is, I have been speaking to Roddy McKenzie, who's my new arboricultural and urban woodlands sort of lead, and he's thinking it'd be quite a good idea to get these guys out into industry, because we're finding with the ARBs in particular, they come to the end of year one and all they want to do is go and climb trees. They just want to go. So we lose a lot of them. So our HND second year is actually, it normally gets hit by a lot of people, just students disappearing off into industry. So we're looking at how we can improve that retention by either providing that mid-year placement or encouraging it as part of the course, and then looking at how we get them back in, whether it be full-time or part-time. Excuse me a second. Sorry about that. So the idea is to work with industry and to make sure that the course that we are running and is correct and matches what industry are required. So we have a forestry advisory committee that at the moment Julian is our chairperson for, and the idea is we link with industry to make sure that what we are delivering to our students is what the industry is actually needing. So we do have a really good, and we've always had a good relationship with industry right across the board, to make sure that that sort of delivery is acceptable and is what's required. The one thing we are starting to pick up, certainly at a lower level, is the skill shortage at the practical level, the tree planting, the chainsaw operating, the machinery operating level, where I think Brexit has had a big impact on a lot of our Eastern European colleagues who have ventured back home. When I look at the nursery sector, the reliance on that sort of for transient group of people to come in and work in the nurseries, that hasn't been there the last couple of years, and I know they've been hit really bad, not just with COVID, but mainly because of the Brexit move. So how do we get back to our homegrown workforce and make it attractive and let them see the benefit of what they're doing it now, whether we use the green or the carbon capture or the environmental avenue to try and encourage them in. But I think our job here is to get into the mind of our youngsters, to tell them what an industry you're going to get into. Your tree planting may only be for 2 or 3 years. Look what you can do next. What's out there. So we, as an educational facility here, we try and encourage speakers to come in. And I'm going to use Julian as a fine example. I mean, Julian has been involved with various on-site chats with our students, walk about the woods, etc. We've had Ben Clinch over at Murray Estates involved. Certainly we've had Scottish Forestry, Forestry Land Scotland, but also other private sector people, either online, because it's a fantastic tool to use if we can use it, but certainly sort of local folk coming in and actually talking to the students about their job and how what you're learning is going to benefit them. So I think it's important that we, as an education establishment, we're always looking to move and shake and just push the boundaries a little bit, but also make sure that, as I say, back to what I said earlier on, let's make sure that what we are doing is what industry are requiring. I think that's the most important thing. I mean, I was at a meeting just before this at the Scottish Forestry Timber Technologies Group, the mid-country section, and we were talking about that massive skills gap that we're having just now right across industry. And I think it's vital that industry and ourselves work together along with Education Scotland and the schools and the councils to make sure that the kids coming on stream at a very basic level are ready and willing. Back to I use the terminology of 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic. You know, if you can get the basics right, it's amazing what you can do with willing minds. I think Till Hill have had the example where they've been taking people with degrees with, either whether it be geography, biology or whatever, and nurturing them and molding them and shaping them into a future forester. I think, that it just goes, if you get the right person, doesn't matter what their background. I mean, as you mentioned about the environmental science side of it, I think if we can get that message out to schools, this is the caliber, this is the people we want. Yes, you're going to get folk who don't know. Let them have a wee taste and sit and see if we can encourage them and keep them on board. But I think if we can get in early, primary school even, but certainly secondary school, to kind of get those people coming on board, I think that's a really good start for the future of forestry and the forest industry, and also the forestry education side of it. The other side is capturing folk who are career changers. But that's something else that, obviously the industry and ourselves have to look at. But that's where we are just now. I mean, it's looking quite healthy this year so far. We've got 31 applicants, which on average we're looking somewhere between 28 and 48 is what we get for the HN. The FE side of it, so the Certificate 5, we're looking at potentially 36 students coming in, which means I'll be running 3 classes hopefully this year. That's my goal, to have 3 level 5 classes. Level 4 normally is 12 students, and level 6, which is a progression from level 5 normally, we're looking at up to 12 students for that as well. The other option I did put in there, I haven't mentioned, was the PDA, which is a Professional Development Award, and that's like a part-time half HNC program to encourage people who don't really know what they want to do, either in the sector or they're just coming into forestry fresh and they're working full-time. It just gives them a taster and they can make a decision on, whether they want to continue on with the HNC. So that's really where I'm at just now. I say we're going through a wee tweak with looking at how our program's been delivered, how we make sure that our FE is fit and up to scratch. But the HE, certainly in the degree, I think we've kind of got that right at the moment. But as I say, we're always welcome for guidance, and the FAC, the Forestry Advisory Committee, have been very, very good at kind of guiding us or hinting at where we might have missed something, or where we're doing well, or where we could improve. So, hopefully onwards and upwards as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil. I just want to thank all of our speakers for their contributions, and what we're going to do is move on to the Q&A part of the session, but I've been sitting taking a lot of notes, and I'm sure Mark has as well. So I'll pass over to my colleague Mark to do the Q&A.
Thanks very much, Jenny. That was really fantastic from, as you said, Jenny, from all our speakers there. Really, really great. If anyone's got any questions in the chat, or any questions, sorry, stick them in the chat at the side there. But as Jenny said, yes, I've got plenty. I was taking lots of notes down there. I guess, Roz, I would quite like to ask you, just have a wee chat with you initially. Mm-hmm. What I found fantastic there was just that variety, and I guess all 3 speakers have really sort of talked on that. It was fascinating, actually, your variety of different jobs within forestry alone. You know what I mean? You as an individual have had all these different roles, so I think that's really great. Interesting for me was, so from Education Scotland, and I don't want to just be too focused on ourselves, we're going through a process of reform. And in part of that was the OECD report, and then Professor Ken Muir from University of West of Scotland has sort of responded to that. Just want to highlight what was key principles of what Ken Muir said about how the curriculum needs to develop. And it was very much about focused on young people. And the key principle, number 2 that came out, number 1 was about children's rights, but actually number 2 was about how important climate change and environment were to our young people.
Yeah.
And actually how we had to really engage on that and really engage with that, and how that has to actually move into almost the heart of our education system. So I was really interested, you mentioned climate, and I know that Julian did there as well. If you get anything else, like just maybe to expand a little bit on that, about how you see the importance of forestry actually when we're thinking about climate, and not just about as, I guess, how we would associate that with trees are taking in carbon, turning it into trees. Actually, perhaps a wee bit more about the sort of role of forestry in that.
Yeah, so forestry has got a massive part to play in, you know, the mitigating climate. And it's, like you say, you know, we're needing to suck in more carbon. So we need to plant more trees. But then we can lock up that carbon as well by increasing the amount of timber in construction, or, you know, in so many different products. You know, I've got a pair of trousers that are actually made out of cellulose that is made from timber, you know, and it's looking at those different ways of using cellulose or using different types of timber. You know, we know about MDF, sticking it all together, but looking at how we can use these different products, that it doesn't have to be just one species, you know, of tree. We can actually use multiple species to you know, to provide these products. There's also changing weather patterns with climate. We have far greater downpours of rain, and that torrential rain, you know, is leading to flooding further downstream. So again, it's this planting upstream, helping to, you know, catch that rain as it's coming down, slow it down, and help not cause this, you know, sheet runoff happening down into the rivers, into the streams, and then into the towns. I think it is also about the landscape, you know, and young people are talking about this a lot, and how they see. I think there's a massive education to be done. We have to be careful that young people don't just hear the words like logging of the Amazon, and then they see a clearfell site here in the UK, and that is awful, and it's, you can never chop down a tree. You know, we need commercial forestry to be able to provide these products, which is a carbon neutral cycle. So we need to go there, but we also need to be able to bring young people in for them to educate us, the decision makers, as in what do they see going forwards into the future, and what forests do they want of the future too.
Fantastic, Ros. That's bizarrely, just before this, I was in a meeting with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation talking about circular economy, talking about sustainable products. And I think that is a message perhaps we're not getting across so well, about how important actually trees and timber is as a sustainable product, and as something that we actually use. So that's got me thinking, whether anyone else, I'm going to start thinking about how I develop some stuff round about that. Janie, you get any other points for Ros before I move on?
Yeah, I was just thinking around what you were just saying there, and thinking back to when I was actually teaching around that I was a biology teacher, so that was an area that I was working in. I always sort of made the point about the difference between the kind of the length of time it takes to grow a hardwood in the rainforest in comparison to the growth of what we would see in this country, and also the fact that you know, you see it being replanted and it is that sort of cycle. So it just made me sort of go, excellent. I'm very glad I was talking about there. But one of the things that I actually picked up on, which is probably just this tiny little bit, about you mentioned about collecting the seeds, and I was always really interested, and people were interested in almost like, why is it so important to collect the seeds from around here and plant those, as opposed to just sort of going and getting sort of some kind of commercial something. So you mentioned sort of collecting the seeds. Does that mean that it's to do with the types of trees that you're planting?
Yeah, so it's provenance as well. It's that, you know, a tree is, you don't want to plant a tree that isn't going to do well in that environment. And so again, and it's about collecting those seeds and then being able to grow them on and bring them back to that area as well, because we know they are going to have the best chance of being successful. And otherwise it's a huge, waste of money. And also what is appropriate for our environment, and the risk of bringing in some different tree diseases. There's mass trials going on at the moment across the world looking at, different tree species growing on and saying, with a changing climate, what will be best. I think that is something that we'll also have to take into account as, as we get, certain parts of the country gets drier. Is that going to be appropriate for Sitka spruce, say, or what should we be planting instead? But yes, it's, there's this whole other industry that happens where you have seed collectors going out and collecting these on to take to the nursery, who grow them on, who then send them back out, and that is all catalogued. We have seed certificates that tell us where it's come from and therefore where it's best to go back to.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for that, Rose. The other bit I would actually say was the feeling of, for our own mental and emotional health actually during COVID. I think my experience is lots of people really, really benefited from having a woodland to walk about in. So I'm down here in Glasgow and I live in the city, and it was a lifesaver, not just for me, I think for many, many of us. And again, that's something I think lots of our young people actually experienced during lockdown, how important these green spaces were. So thank you very much, Roz, for all of that. Julian, I was hoping to ask you a couple of questions.
Fire away, Mark.
Yes, I won't make them hard, promise. Actually, what was something that really struck me, I guess, when we were talking about technology. And so I used to be a ranger, all these different things. And something that's always been there is sometimes a wee bit of a sort of, oh, you love the outdoors, thusly you don't like the technology. And I don't think that is accurate at all moving forward. But I guess what was interesting was, and Neil touched a little bit on this, the changing nature of forestry as an industry and how technology is going to have to become more and more of an important part of it. You driving your desk, for instance, well recognise that problem as well as we move further up. Do you think some of the big changes perhaps in forestry that could be over, like, let's say the next 20 years, I know that's a very short period of time when we're talking about trees and forests here, but I'm thinking with young people, actually, we probably do have a perception of it's planting trees and it's cutting down trees. That's it. But if you get any sort of ideas of perhaps where things are moving that would be quite innovative or what's going to be happening in forestry like that?
Yeah, so the two main areas that we've been looking at in technology is use of drones and then satellites. This won't replace, it cannot replace a forester going out and getting boots on the ground, but I think it's being more efficient with your time. So about 10 to 15% of our foresters currently have drones or drone pilots, and there's a training program around that. And what we're trying to, what we're using is the data that we capture with drones is to enable the foresters to come from a more informed position. So if you've got a wind blow event, so we've had lots of storms over the last few months, and traditionally the forest manager would have walked around the forest and tried to get a scale on what trees are blown over that storm. What we can do now is that, within relatively ease, a forester could put a drone in the air, within, a few hours of planning, and then an hour of a flight time, and they will have a much more informed decision of the scale of the event. So that's good use of technology. and a good efficiency saving of using the drone. The downside is the wind has to stop blowing because you can't fly the drone in the rain and the wind. And we live in the north of Scotland. In the north of Scotland, it does tend to be a bit blowy and a bit wet, so you can't rely on the weather. And then also use of satellites. So the satellites are there all the time. So how can we capture the same information? And we're using satellites to look at plant disease, how the crops are growing. Again, there's similar challenges over cloud. We can only see the crop when there's no cloud. But when we replant, we try and have this matrix of planting density, and when we're able to use the technology to ensure that not only that we've planted the right number of trees, so rather than sampling where we would take a certain percentage, we can use drones or satellites to look at the total, either the gross or the net area. So we spend a lot of time discussing that, but also the matrix. So what is the planting density? What's the distance between the trees? Coming back to the maths that we were talking about earlier on, we do sampling, and it's much more efficient using drones. That being said, both the drones and the satellite will not tell you the quality of the mound, so this position where the tree is actually sitting. The forester will have to get out there and with a spade and see what's happening with that tree. So we can help with the efficiency of the forest manager, but we can only do that with the caveat of the weather. And you can go there with the full intention of flying the drone, and you end up actually just walking the ground.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that example, actually. Again, it has been on the ground. It is hands-on, but it's also using technology, and it's cutting-edge technology. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're talking satellites, we're talking drones. And I think that is a really quite an attractive package for many young people as well. Maybe using some of their digital skills, but don't want to be stuck in an office. They would like that sort of aspect of being outdoors and working outdoors, as I mentioned earlier, for emotional, mental health as much as anything else, actually. So again, that's a great message, I think, for us, and in particular when we're talking about looking at digital skills across the north, that actually these are really relevant. And I mean, we had the same thing with our agriculture talk recently as well, how important some of this is. Jenny, would you like to come in?
Yeah, absolutely. Julian, while you were talking earlier, one of the things I was thinking, and it's one of those questions that I like to ask pretty much everybody I speak to, is what piece of advice would you give to a young person that was thinking about getting into your industry?
So forestry is a vocation, so you've got to have a real passion for the industry. I think to what piece of advice? I think to ask lots of questions, to speak to foresters, and to ask and to listen to the answers, so just ask lots of questions. The piece of advice, and form your own opinions.
Thanks very
much. That's great life advice. Great life advice,
just generally
actually,
helpful.
isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's great. Aware of the time here, so we're almost out of time. Neil, that was a really excellent, delve into actually all the sort of pathways and everything. I just thought it was fascinating. There was something actually I thought really struck me, and probably my central belt bias and all the rest of it here that's always on show. It was actually, again, I mentioned the agriculture talk we were doing. It's that idea of actually going through and coming up with the Scottish School of Forestry and things, and how that opens doors, not just here, but actually the opportunity to travel the world perhaps, and actually go to places that you might dream of going, and actually being able to get work there. Could you expand a little bit on that? That's something that was always motivated me as a young man. And we had Jenna Ross, who was talking about agriculture and how she had travelled the world doing different things as well. So would you mind maybe expanding a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think one thing we've got, Sandy, I'll be about 10 minutes or so. Is that okay? Thank you. So there's someone coming to kick me out of the building. No, the Forestry, Scottish School of Forestry, I mean, the Erasmus program, which had been running up until recently, obviously with Brexit, it's been closed down now. It's kind of a bit scary, but I was at a recent network meeting with the Erasmus Forestry Network they were down in France at Les Bars College there. They are desperate to keep us on stream because as a college, we have sent people out into industries since I think the late 80s, to be honest. So we've had that connection. We've got students who are working for UPM, for example, in Finland, for the big paper or a pulp organization over there, a guy called Robert Taylor. He's one of the directors of that organization. We've got students who are working in Canada. With the opportunities for students at whatever level to go into industry. I was at the recent expo down in Moffat, it was a couple of years ago in Moffat, and I met a guy who was from Australia. He was over here touting for business, and he took one of my students at a FE level, so a level 5, no degree, no HND, but a desire and wanting to go. He's now working on a harvesting machine over there with them. So, the opportunities internationally, nationally, locally, nationally, internationally are huge. And I think something linking on to what Julian was saying there, ask questions, but most importantly, don't go blinkered. The forestry sector is not just about the tree. I mean, Ros, brilliant. It's not just about the trees. Yep. The baby one's important as heck. The more mature one's really, really important. But it's what else is out there. The timber technologies, my new boss, Carrie, she's the head of our department, the construction and forestry department now. And Carrie is a construction background, timber technologies and architectural design. Straight away, bing, timber technologies. It is huge. James Jones have got the I-beam factory through in Forest. Went on a visit there with our HND students. Fantastic visit, looking at what they're doing with timber to trap that carbon. And these I-beams, these I-joists, I mean, to tell a pupil at school that this I-joist that you can lift up, the same size I-joist, if it was metal, you would not be able to lift it. And yet the strength of that I-joist in wood is the same as a similar size in metal. So when you put the two, look at how the production of that metal one compared to the timber one, straight away your carbon footprint is just exponential. So I think from an educational perspective, getting to pupils and to students and to anyone who's looking at an industry which has got a massive global impact, but also global pull, forestry, I'm sorry, I don't think you can beat it. It's just massive. So the potential for what we can do, what we can provide, how we can drive and how we can steer. I've got a lecturer coming, he's joining me from Australia at the moment. He's moving from Australia to come and work with us. But the connections he's got directly with Australia, New Zealand and Southern Hemisphere forestry is going to really give our students that opportunity to get away and discover what it's all about. Give me an African guy coming over as well. Give me someone from South America. Yeah. I would like to have a broad lecturer base that tells the story of what forestry is all about. It's not just what's on your doorstep. Janie, Murrayshire. You drive through Murrayshire, it's everywhere. You look at what forest in Murrayshire. Actually, I'm not sure, Ros, if you can confirm or not, is sitting about 30% forest cover. Dumfries and Galloway about 33% cover. They are the most forested regions in the UK. You may get down to Kielder where you've got the biggest, sort of the largest man-made forest in Northern Europe. But we are still up here, if you think about Murrayshire and Dumfries and Galloway. It's sitting at 30-odd%, whereas the national average in Scotland is between 17 and 19, and in England it's down at 12. So what we have to offer as far as getting the students out there is massive. I always encourage my placement students to fly, to get as far away from Inverness as possible and go and experience forestry somewhere else, because what we have here is fantastic. It's on our doorstep, but it's not what it's all about. Julian coming from down south to work up here, his experience of North England forestry and our experience up here. I was brought up down in Cheshire, so I came from Delamere Forest is kind of my haunting ground, but I did my training down in Hagley at Hereford College of Agriculture on the YTS course. So my forestry experience ranges from south of England, or so mid-England, right the way up to north of Scotland, working in Fort William doing chainsaws and skyline winch operations. So, I've done steep slope, I've done it all from that, what I call coppicing, the old, the most, the iconic management system in forestry to commercial forestry at a big scale. So we have a lot to offer, and I think getting that across to pupils, your 3 R's, your mathematics, you're going to need it. Your English, you're going to need it. But the support is there for those who struggle with it. It's not a case of if you haven't got it, tough, away you go. There is support here at the college to give those students who struggle with those areas, right, let's see the techniques. Here's a forester who has got dyslexia. Here's a forester who has got dyscalculus. Here's someone who is a head forester or someone who is leading in an organization that is a finance organization linked with financing forestry. So the links that we've got, thanks to people like Julian and people at sort of James Jones, the Forestry Commission, the Scottish Forestry Commission, Forestry Land Scotland and Scottish Forestry, it's allowed our facility to survive. We're still here. We're still churning out foresters where we can, but not just churning out on a conveyor belt. It's making sure, or trying to make sure, that they go out into the industry ready. So when Julian, as I'm using Julian as an example with Till Hill and Roz at Scottish Forestry, the guys that we give them, all they need to do is polish them up, direct them in the avenue which they want to push them, or direct them, or ask the question, can I try that, please? Yeah, okay, give them the opportunity to try it. And it's making them realize what is out there for them.
Fantastic. Excellent. I just love the passion. And just from before I pass over to Jenny, just to share actually with you guys, on Monday, this is only Wednesday, I went across the road. So I'm down here in Glasgow. I'm in the south side of Glasgow, but within the city. We went across the road, me, my son Isaac, my partner Suki, and we planted a wee forest as part of Green Action Trust. So Isaac planted 12 trees, 36, there's that old joke. But actually Isaac came back as an 8-year-old absolutely psyched, as a wee Glaswegian guy going, that was amazing. And also he was quite surprised it wasn't that hard as well. But just that idea, I think, of get out there, plant a tree, feel good, and then actually all the messages we've heard today, you can actually make a career of that, because I think that's really part of it as well. So thank you all very much for that. I'm just going to pass over to Janie now, just to round up for us.
Thank you, everybody. I'm having that moment where I feel so enthusiastic. I'm sort of to look at career changes, which seems to happen every time I have one of these STEM Industry in the North sessions. But yes, and I know I'm a very lucky person to be living where I do, and I certainly took advantage of it today to go for a little walk in the woods. I'm just going to pop up a little end of session reflection. So I'm just share my screen if my computer is working. Just occasionally it starts to have a moment where it says no. So just to ask the attendees, be very grateful if you could complete the webinar evaluation. I'm going to pop that into the chat as well. So it's just a little Microsoft form. It doesn't take too long at all to do, but it does help us to build and decide on what we're going to look at kind of moving forward. And I always put this little image up as well, because I think it's helpful to, at the end of the session, think about what you might take away, particularly as a practitioner. You're going to go back into your establishment tomorrow, and what are you taking from this? And I think there's an awful lot. For a start, I am feeling very excited with everything and want to go in and find out more about all the different career opportunities. There's a little bit of me that wishes I was back in the classroom to tell the children and young people I was teaching about it. However, I do actually know that one of my wonderful students that I had all the way through school and also all the way to advanced higher went on to go to the School of Forestry as well. So that was a really exciting, always came back and told me what they were actually doing. So it was great to hear from that. And just a reminder as well that this is not the last of our series. We have coming up in April, we're going to be looking at technologies, and May, life and chemical sciences, and rounding up the year in June, delving into the food and drink sector. So it's STEM Industry in the North is really focused on the growth sectors across the north of Scotland. And if you want to sign up to any of those, you just go to Events on Education Scotland site and search for STEM. And there's lots of different things that you can be involved in just now. And I will stop there, folks, and just say thank you very much to everybody that spoke today, and thank you very much to everybody that attended as well. It was a fantastic session.